that would be great, just so we don't distract the speaker. Thank you. I'm just getting used to presenting in a hybrid way. There we go. Right, now, hopefully, we should be able to see the presentation in the room and virtually. So I'm going to introduce Steve. Thanks very much, Steve, for coming and talking to us today. So Steve's had various engineering roles at London Underground and Alstom before he joined Greater Anglia as head of Fleet North. He's a chartered electrical engineer, or electronics, I'm not quite sure. Electronic engineer. And he's going to talk to us today about his fleet of trains, and I'm sure we're going to really enjoy your talk, Steve. So please come to the lectern and give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toby. Really pleased to be invited here today, and particularly in person, given the last few years. So it's really, really good. Apologies to everybody online. I am going to be spending most of my time talking to these good ladies and gents in the room, and you're just going to get the side of my head. But hopefully you'll still get the point of the presentation. Oh my goodness, what an agenda. It's a good job I talk fast, really, isn't it? So I'm going to try and cover a lot, because actually there is a lot to cover if you're introducing a new fleet of trains. So I won't spend too long on that slide. I have the mandatory who are we, Greater Anglia, for those that don't know us. We cover London, Stratford up to Norwich. We have rural routes, we have some suburban routes, we've got an airport service, and we've got our flagship intercity service as well. So quite a few different types of train. We're about 3,000 employees. We're getting back to our 350,000 passengers a day. We're not quite there yet. And we're getting back to running about 1,921, not being precise, services a day. We're not quite there yet either. We've got about 9,500 kilometres of route, and we're 135 miles that way, and 94 miles that way. So our business, the old franchise and the old franchising model began on the 16th of October 2016. It's that franchise that needed these trains and called for these new trains. We went through what was called an IMechE, then we had, IMechE, then an IMechE, and now we're under something called a national rail contract. In essence, it's a management contract. Yeah, we get a fixed fee as a Velio, or now Transport UK Limited, to run it, and then we get an additional bonus if our performance parameters do well, if our key metrics are doing well. It finishes in 2024, but can be extended to 2026, and hopefully, unless we do anything particularly bad, it will be extended to 2026. Trains, I'm not going to talk a massive amount of trains today, just going to give an overview, because I'm talking more about the service introduction aspects to bringing in a new train. We've bought 10 EMU 12-car fixed formation intercity trains, which are configured for an intercity type service, first class, bistro. We've bought 10 regional airport trains, which run Stansted to Liverpool Street. We've bought 24 bi-mode trains, that's both pantograph and diesel, and we've bought 14 3-car bi-mode trains. Yeah. Looking at some of the key features of those trains, as you'd expect with a modern train, it's got aircon, it's got Wi-Fi, they've got plug sockets, nice modern PIS. That's a bit of a nightmare when it has to get all its data off the track all the time, because that was good fun. Seat reservations. Mobile friendly, we've got special windows that let mobile signals in, even though they've got blank the sun glare out. Yeah, forward-facing track CCTV, forward-facing CCTV, track debris cameras, saloon cameras. In fact, it's over 100 cameras on one of those 12-car trains. It's about 112 cameras just on one train. So a lot of data. It's a lot of cameras. These trains brought some innovative features, certainly innovative to the UK. The low-floor access, with the extending step to make them extremely accessible, which has been extremely successful for us. We've had a lot of really good positive feedback in terms of accessibility. The articulated bogies, again, not entirely new, certainly if you Eurostar previous trains, articulated bogies, but for most of the railways it's new. And of course the bi-mode operation, basically big Deutz engines inside a power pack, if I go back briefly, that little vehicle in the middle, yeah, that's providing the power. And then basically that power, regardless of whether it's coming from a pantograph transformer, that's what then powers the trains. So, and the other feature, which probably wasn't listed when they were first there, which is also quite unique, and did worry us to start with, albeit it doesn't now, is the fact they've only got one door per vehicle, not two. To maximise the use of the space inside. It changes the feel of the vehicle as well, which has been very positive. We were really worried about dwell times. So far, there's not been an issue with dwell times. We've not had any issues with dwell times. It's worked really, really well. So, moving on. This is what it feels like when you introduce a new train. Yeah, and I put there BAU, business as usual. Yeah, and a lot of people have introduced trains or done big transform projects. Actually, part of the secret is to try and get that right balance between continuing to run your day service, don't let your service levels drop, whilst at the same time running a transform business. Yeah, and for that, our business as usual, we were a £650 million turnover business. It was a £650 million train procurement program. You know, that's big stuff, and it all comes together in the depot largely when you get a conflict, because people want to prioritise running the service every day, riders is nodding, versus people wanting to do test trains to get these new test trains in. And part of introducing a new train is about how you manage that interface. And for me, that's more of an emotional feeling slide, because that's exactly how it felt at the time. One little bit of the intro that should have been done. Before I was head of Fleet North, I was the joint project manager. So I actually did the procurement of the trains from Greater Anglia's perspective. And then they said, you've made your bed, go lie in it. Yeah, you bought these trains, now go and make them work. Yeah, so I have the advantage of having had that continuity from 2016 when that contract was first signed, right now to what you're getting on for 3 years worth of service. So key areas. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to read that, but that's just to go, hang on a minute, we need to think about this, we need to think about that, we need to think about that. And when you're doing what Greater Anglia did, which is change their entire fleet of trains, not just the Stadlers today, but all the 720s for the Southern, there is not one part of your business that doesn't change. There might be people working somewhere at a station somewhere thinking, this doesn't affect me. They're wrong. Every single part of your business is going to change. Top to bottom, left to right, doesn't matter what department you're in. It's going to change if you change every single one of your trains. That's a lot of stuff to manage, because there's not a lot of not changing. Servicing, I'm picking these examples, and I will rush through them because I've got quite a lot here. Ability of carriage washes, yeah, little things like carriage wash is set up for the profile of your old train. Now you've got a nice low floor train that's got a different profile, it's not washing the bottom. When do we change it? How do we convert it? Silly things like that. Sanding, oh my goodness, you know, we put almost 3 tons of sand in a night on this new fleet. The good news of that is I've only had one casualty wheel flat slide in the 2 years that I've been running them in autumn. So they've done the business that way, but the downside is you have to think about how we're putting all this sand in, which we didn't have to do before. Interfaces as well, just things like AdBlue, which we didn't have before, and even watering, the type of connectors we use. All of this practical stuff's changing. Ability to clean a 12 car, where you're going to do it. It's a 12 car long train. We used to have local haul coaching stock. You just wheeled a couple of coaches round into the cleaning shed on 18 Road and cleaned them. Now you've got fixed formation 12 car. A quantity of facilities as well. You know, everybody did their calculations in the stages of infrastructure, and they did what I would call high level calculations. And then we're finding it wasn't working because the devil's in the detail. So we were struggling to keep up, and it was because everything was being done what I would call high level maths. You know, you need to service this train every 2,500 miles, therefore you need this. And actually, when you put in service perturbations, trains don't quite turn up. If you haven't allowed the right contingency in that, you don't get enough equipment. So again, just make sure that you're looking at the detail, not just the high level maths. So detailed servicing plans needed. Yeah, 12 cars are a lot harder. There's only 2 sheds that we've got anywhere near us that you can put a 12 car in for whatever reason. Need contingency, need to agree things like changeover dates for key equipment like carriage wash machines. And then a final thing for the UK, and I know I'm standing at the RSSB, they might have changed this since I've written the slide, but there's no agreed standard for how you fill AdBlue. Is it a petrol pipe, or is it a different type of connector? So when we started to look about how you put AdBlue in trains, whereas there's a pretty standard bulk loader for fuel, you can take your train anywhere and put fuel in it. You can't do it for AdBlue because everyone's got a different bit. So somebody, he says standing in RSSB, needs to think about a standard for that. Route proving as well, so it's part of train introduction, route proving. Running paths is expensive, time consuming, and stops you running your railway. We did a scheme called Mission Room where we took one of our old trains, strapped cameras on it, lots of complicated GPS equipment, and effectively mapped our railway so we could then, as you see in the pictures, people could sit in a room and look through every single station. Where's the furniture? Where's the pillars? Is that ramp going to line up with that door? Where would be the best stopping position? And we did all of that virtually. Of course, we went out and confirmed it in reality. Don't just do it in theory, do it in reality. But you can save a lot of time and effort if you've actually planned this stuff beforehand. So big thing for us was curved platforms. It's always curved platforms, certainly when you've got DO equipment strapped to the side of your train. It actually went quite well for us. And I think we're a bit lucky because we went and hit on this mission room stuff and it really, really worked. So, so plan ahead, mission rooms useful, but you must still do the real thing. ASDO, if you've got an ASDO system, make sure you're up front working out your databases and how they work. Otherwise you can trip over getting the databases done. Stop boards and signal sightings all in one hit. Plan for curved platforms. Small competent team to do this. You need a mix of people from your ops and from your engineering. Make sure you've got a good mix of competent people. Next thing, processes, business processes. When you've got a third party maintaining it, leads to big changes. Even if you've already got them, we already have them in Bombardier and Siemens for our 379s and 360s. But actually, when they then take over and they're almost a single supplier in a depot, it leads to a lot of changes. New fleet has big changes for the business. Too much time spent discussing standard engineering change. Those that are involved in engineering change, I'm pragmatist. But if you haven't established that right, what it is we need as an operator for engineering change up front, before you're into the real thick of needing to do engineering changes on a regular basis because of mods, you're going to spend all of your time, your reliability growth is going to slow because you'll actually be standing at that point debating the standard of engineering change. Yeah, don't be afraid to get the ORR. I did it. I know Paul Prairie quite well, and many people probably do in the room. And I basically asked Paul to sit down with our new train manufacturer who was new in the UK and talk a few things through about what the expectations might be about software management, etc., etc. Do those things up front before they matter. Process for depot reputation, failure management, commercials, were all not right. We changed them all. And 3 years later, they're still not right. We're still refining them, but we're back towards more of an evolutionary rather than a revolutionary change. So even once you've done it, expect to do it again. So start at the top, start with your safety management system. Make sure you've got your ECM responsibilities mapped out as well. They might seem obvious, but they're not always obvious depending on your business. As I just said, install engineering change. Documents governance structure. We found meetings popping up all over the place. Different parts of our business wanted to have a meeting about this and another bit about that. So we had to get very strict about what the meeting structures were and what the terms of reference for the meeting were. This is an informal meeting, this is its scope. Because otherwise you found that all over the place, people were discussing the same thing and coming up with different answers in different forums. That just leads to confusion. Yeah, so get the meeting structure defined and then manage it. It can change, it's going to have to change, but it needs to be changed from a managed situation rather than a unmanaged situation. Cascade, and some people might not know what I mean by cascade, but this is as you're moving from a legacy fleet to a new fleet. It's the process of deciding what routes you're doing, what order you're doing them in, how you're going to, this week we're going to get 2 units out of storage into the fault-free running program. We call it the cascade. Yeah. To start with, too many fingers in the pie, too many different agendas, too many different people wanting different stuff, too many false assumptions that were made about movements and staying, the same resource being planned in 2 different ways at the same time. Yeah. So the devil's in the detail. Even if the end state looks like it's okay, the transitional states can still have issues. Yeah. For us, these end dates arrived far more quickly than we would have hoped for. And to make it worse for us, our trains were going to Wales and to Scotland. So saying, please, Mr. DFT, can we have them a little bit longer and talk to whoever was going to get them wasn't really an option. They were going regardless. Yeah. And one of the things to say about the fleet cascade, we took that into engineering because it got what we called engineering revision control. We're at version 49 as we speak today. Yeah. And that's almost one person full time managing just that cascade process. Yeah. There needs to be a balance there as well between the business as usual and the introduction, just to make sure, as I said before, you don't trash your performance of your railway as you're running along. Agree the start point, manage assumptions and risks all the way through a cascade plan. There are going to be risks. Yeah, write down what the assumptions are. You can then continue to learn from it. Set some realistic and not pessimistic targets. Don't fall into the trap of believing everything the manufacturer is going to tell you. Yeah, they're going to deliver 2 per week from now on to the end of the program, non-stop. No, work out what is realistic, what can be done. You'll often find that the cascade program actually ends up being an input to that. So big spreadsheet, bottom-up detail, engineering control, and consultation. We had a weekly meeting, and it was every single week. It's still happening now. Every Wednesday, 9:30, cascade meeting. Key people from across our business still come together and talk about the cascade and what's happening with the timetables. Don't forget your legacy withdrawal, handback, collapse, stabling is important. You still need space for that stuff. You still need to have drivers to move those trains, that kind of stuff. And therefore, don't forget your logistics. Managing the change, yeah, usual management messages here. Communication is important, communication is important, and communication is important, yeah? You cannot do enough of it to your business and different parts of it. If you don't communicate, it ain't gonna happen. People will not be on the same page. You know, the BAU, they steamroller on, yeah? And it's right they're doing that because you want your business to continue to perform. You've got to enable them to do that. So you're still running a significant business in the background there, and you need to be kind of mindful of the fact that that is what they do, yeah? Rate of change is rapid and needs rapid responses, yeah? Enough time and resources to manage the processes, and projects working to deadlines, not the cascade deadlines. Now, what I mean by that was in our infrastructure area, we had a load of reports coming out, RAG reports. This is green. Great, it's fantastic, it's green. But they fell in the fatal mistake that actually that wasn't linked back to the main program. So it was green compared to what the supplier had bid and what they tendered and said, we'll deliver this servicing update by, I don't know, July. The fact is the cascade needed it by June. And therefore everything's going green, 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 because they're measuring it against one thing and it was something else. So there's a lot of opportunities to go wrong because you've got project teams, you've got your business as usual, that's just in Greater Anglia. And then of course in your manufacturer, generally these days you've got both the manufacturer and the maintainer. And again, don't think they're the same. I'll come to that a little bit later because they're not always on the site. You assume that they're one company, they're not, yeah. Manage at multiple levels as well. So for us, it was overall readiness, you know, are the trains ready, what functionality, but then on a route specific basis, what route proving, what checking, what driver training, and then local as well in individual areas. Good management practice, I think is an obvious statement. Clear governance, I've already mentioned. Clear validation of information. Our minimum beat rate, it was weekly and quite often daily. And I can't emphasize this point enough when you're in this project environment. Most of our businesses are set up on the 4 weekly reporting cycle. You go to a meeting every 4 weeks. If you go to a meeting 4 weeks later and you haven't quite got round to your action on a new train delivery program, you're lost. You cannot manage it on a 4 weekly reporting cycle. There needs to be a far more stronger beat rate. You need to up that beat rate. Things need to be easy to read and understand. People use things like P6. I'm not criticising some of this project management software, great, but stick P6 in front of a station manager down at Cambridge and an output, he's got no idea. So you've got to simplify it and convert it into dashboards and stuff that people can see. It's an example in the bottom right hand corner there where, you know, we took the different elements and dashboarded it so that everybody could easily see where we're at. We came to the conclusion we need a separate business readiness team, yeah. And you need to pull the best people in your business together for that. It's not whoever you can afford. You need to be looking for those bright sparks, those people that have got the energy, that have got the pace in order to be in those teams because you're going to need it, yeah? And then the final thing is, which I know sounds a little bit different to that, but once you've got those trains running, you need to start integrating this back into your business as usual as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're still going to run these 2 parallel paths of the project trying to deliver more trains while the business is running the day-to-day. And the business running day-to-day will trip over what's going on with the new train introduction. So organisationally and everything, we look to integrate back into the business at the earliest opportunity. So that, again, the business then felt it was in control of its destiny again, not a separate project team. Depots, yeah, big plans keep changing. I've seen lots and lots of franchises that have had real struggle delivering the depots. All the solutions seem to be having unacceptable compromises. Use of a working depot makes life hard for all. Probably understatement of the year, actually. So really hard. The conflicting requirements are hour by hour, not even just day by day or week by week. It's hour by hour. There's conflict between what you're doing and what you're doing for what facilities. And that's against, this is a people piece comment, that's against the backdrop of actually, got to remember, a lot of those people working in those depots delivering those services are probably on some form of 2p notice. You're going to go and work for this manufacturer when we reach the X train in the delivery. Now, those people, they've just waited for 2 years while you've designed, built and manufactured this train in a life of uncertainty, being told that they're going to go across and work for somebody else in 2 years' time. Right? And you cannot underestimate what that does. And you've got to think really hard about how you manage that. Because if you don't, and you're not keeping people on board, even if they do move across and everything's all fine once they've moved, that journey they will have been through will cause a lot of damage to them, a lot of damage to your business, and a lot of damage to your new maintainer as well. So 12-car train limits possibilities in so many areas, and there's a bit of a political point here. Have anybody got any aspirations or is any position to ever set up buying trains? Don't buy 12-car trains again, please don't. I know we've done it in a number of areas, but it just, stick them in. Even if you only still have 2 cabs and an auto coupler, Northern Line style in the middle, do that, because you don't have to have a 12-car lift, which we haven't got because it was unworkable. Yeah, you can go and put them in a depot and wheel turn them when you haven't got 240 metres of spare space down the hedge jump. It's just don't do it. So, funny enough, that's my last point. I've probably emphasised before everything else. The other thing, and this is my observation, we actually do what we call conditions precedent in the buy, where the signing of the contract in the franchise, the signing of the franchise contract, you used to have to sign up to your new train procurement. They wanted to see it almost in blood, the Department of Transport, before you could actually move ahead. They don't do that with the big civils contracts that then support it. They then get let afterwards. And yet actually a lot of those civil contracts are a longer time to do your design and build than actually the train turns out to be. And there's part of me that says, actually, if you could shift that back and make sure that that was all kind of signed up to the same degree, then you might stand more chance of delivering your big infrastructure. I've said it before, it needs to be on a stopwatch, not a calendar. Include the manufacturer in the depot design review. I know it sounds obvious, we didn't. We're paid price, come back to being too commercial at the time, bit hit and miss. Are we going to be late delivering the depot? Are they going to be late with the trains? That horrible LD word comes in. You're not careful, it's a bit cloak and dagger. And then because they've not been involved, you then find out stuff later that you really should have found out before. You were trying to manage it through correspondence. Avoid using a working depot if possible. Do not underestimate the people, please, and have a very clear structure to deal with any issues arising, because they are. So is your governance fit for purpose? Can it deal with all these things? Stabling, we changed ours 18 months into the franchise. It went from 4 trains being on site at a time and to effectively then storing most of the new and the old fleet at the same time, 23 of the bi-modes and 11 of the EMUs. So a lot of them. We had to look for cheap stabling locations. We went off to Mid-Norfolk Railway to get a lot of storage, picture there on the right. We brought some Wensum sidings back into use, so that was the plan. What we didn't expect was the frequency of moves from site, backwards and forwards. We'd assumed a simple workflow. Reality is far more random and difficult. Again, finding 12-car space was difficult, yeah? So we ended up with not enough stabling, delay in service entry, then we had to exceed the 23 and the 11, and that got even harder. So our stabling plan did not cater for the details of the transitions. And I nick one of those little games that I'm sure we've all played, which has the one spare space, and it literally felt like we were playing the game in those spare spaces because there was just nothing left. And therefore, whatever you did cost you more drivers, more time, and got more complicated. So keep the new entire of your fleet standby. But it did actually mean the production wasn't the critical part. It did actually help. They were out actually in those stabling locations doing mods, getting on with stuff. So I have to say there was a positive with storing all those trains. Yeah. So it could be used as a work site. Building contingency, and again, don't buy 12-car fixed floor trains. Driver training plan. Driver training was in 3 parts. A simulator, which was 3 days, handling, which was a day, and then we had a separate catch-up on OTCM and dispatch. That's because At the time we bought the first trains and put them into use, we weren't using that. Yeah, we didn't have an ASDO database that worked. We didn't have an OTCM system that was signed off. Yeah, so which is the DOO monitoring, the in-cab CCTV for anybody that doesn't know. And we were doing it with manual dispatch. So we ended up with this extra little course that was on there. This is going back in time now. Part A was in October 18, Part B February, and then February 19. We did a run rate of 10 to 16 drivers per week. Yeah, it would deliver enough drivers by May for the planned introduction, kept driver training off the critical path and away from the 3-month refresh, which is what you want to do. Yeah, for efficiency, planned fault-free running to be manned by driver training. Yeah, oh, so we'll tell you what, we'll save some money, and instead of having lots of extra drivers to do fault-free running, we'll use the driver training. Yeah, delay to the train being fit for driver training. So now all of a sudden that train manufacturer bits caused a bit of delay to driver training. Large numbers of Part A were done, but they can't do B, and then needed to be retrained. As they still wasn't available, then they needed a separate catch-up. We then ended up effectively with lots of additional meet and greet with drivers at stations, because our conclusion was one-day handling was not enough. They needed more on these. It did depend, if I'm honest. Well, we went from 379s, which was a train with a TCMS and DOO anyway, less of an issue than we were at Norwich, going from Class 90 locos built in the 80s to a modern train. So perhaps we didn't look enough at the gap. We also then cancelled training because, funny enough, we had no units for fault-free running. They weren't quite ready on certain days. So driver training becomes very near the critical path. So on reflection, close discussion between project team and ops. Efficiency first, effectiveness. This is one of my mantras anyway, because everybody goes around talking about making things efficient. And I love that little diagram in the corner that says, actually, if you get efficiency without effectiveness, you just die quickly. Yeah, because, you know, you become very efficient at what you're doing, but if it's not effective, you're not getting anywhere. So yes, you're striving for both, but first of all, you need to be effective in what you're delivering. Then you can work out how you're going to be efficient. And unfortunately, with our wonderful plan of using and multiplying up, we crossed that line because we were tripping each other up by trying to save a few little bucks, to be perfectly honest. The other thing is we also were very, serial. We're going to do Norwich, we're going to do Ipswich, we're doing Cambridge. And actually, in reality, on driver training, we needed more of an overlap. So we're getting halfway through Norwich, we needed to kick off Ipswich just to give us a bit more contingency. Contract management. Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people about contract management. This is probably more up to date. Yeah, like, you know, again, another little picture there. Feels like you've got this bloody great contract down the middle of Crown Point Depot and you split it in half. Yeah, you converted it into operations still with Greater Anglia and all the operating side and the depot facilities, and then the maintenance is now, in our case, Stadler. Yeah, and this bloody great thing called TSA has come down the middle. And when I took over, I moved from JPM to Head of Fleet North, I literally found shift managers from Stadler and from GA sending each other emails quoting clauses in the contract. And I came in and I went, this is daft. I've employed 70 contract managers and no rolling stock engineers. Yeah, because actually, if on a shift basis, all you're doing is saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, this is your, now you're lost. You need to find a way to separate that out. You need to keep the contract away from the front end delivery in any particular rolling stock. You need to find a way of allowing those people to get on with the job without actually worrying about what the contractual commercials are. So the contract objectives that you've inherited don't always align. The people piece is often missing as well in it. By doing this, it's an obvious statement, your overheads go up, and there may be good reasons for doing that because it may help deliver. Depot management split in two, can run deep into the shift organisation, as I've said, and even the other point I had and we've discovered is you sit there and we think of Stadler, but actually if you're not careful, depending on what you've put in your procurement contract and what you've put in your maintenance contract, even their objectives aren't aligned. They're actually tripping each other up. One's going for emptying, doesn't care, as long as the train doesn't cause a delay. The fact that it's going to take 10 hours to fix every night and there's too many of them happening and we haven't got any trains tomorrow, they don't care because their emptying's okay. Yeah, I'm vice versa. So I'm not going to give you a train for a mod because if I am, I'm going to go short on the TSA. So don't assume that your manufacturer maintainer are all necessarily on the same page because they've got the same badge on their front. So lessons learned, focus on one team, one goal. Co-locate where possible as well, shift offices, communication, keep the contract and commercial away from the coalface as much as possible. If you can, try and deal with the MSA via the TSA as much as you can through them. Don't try and deal with both at the same time. Try and take as much through TSA as possible. Be careful what you wish for when you design the LDs. We inherited a load of LDs, we hated them, we rewrote them, and now again, they're probably not fit for purpose. They've created some perverse incentives. And if possible, try some carrot as well as stick. My observation is that a lot of them these days are all very, very much LD, liquidated damages, stick basis, and it's a different philosophy. When I worked for Alstom, and I'll link it back now, when I worked for Alstom, there was a bonus scheme. It's far easier to go back and go, hey boss, can I borrow some, I want to invest in this because I can actually get paid some more money, than it is to keep going back and saying, look, we're failing badly, we're paying all these LDs out, I need to spend more money above the budget in order to make up and stop us paying the money. One's a lose-lose, and the other is potentially a win. So if you can get some bonus schemes in there, it's funny the difference from the other side of the fence that makes. We're a long way from contract figures on availability. It's meant to be 18 out of 20 EMUs and 35 out of 38, really tough. However, that did not account for what I'm calling non-technical, non-contract failures. So fatalities don't count, they're exonerated. Hitting trees doesn't count, you know, hitting horses on the line, all these things was hit. In fact, last year we managed to hit 2 trains on the same tree. I thought it was quite impressive. So it's bad enough when you wake up and go, oh, we've had a bit of a crash, that train's going to be out for a while. Yeah, but boss, the bad news is it's actually 2 trains and it was the same tree. So maintainer, honestly, didn't have enough resources to start with. They have now. Spares levels are wrong. Yeah, pick 5% across the board, but actually it doesn't turn out to be that. Processes are not slick enough as well. So what I turned about earlier on about redoing your processes. I have to say, we gained out in service reductions. It gave us space. So in a funny kind of way, it was not good for many reasons. But from the point of view of giving the business space, that did give us space. Yeah. And the bid plan in the background changed as well. Things that Network Rail had done and hadn't. So the approach we used was back to basics. You know, stick an equation up, availability, mean time between failures and mean time to recovery. Yeah, we put in some crude measurements. Everybody measures MTIN, don't they? And they allocate MTIN. They break MTIN down to the 10th degree. We did it with availability. Every time a train wasn't in traffic, it was being allocated. It was allocated twice, once for why it was there in the first place, and once for what's stopping it from going back in. You know, why did it happen? Why has it stopped? What's stopping it go back in? And we ended up looking and analysing what those core causes of availability were, and then putting in place a joint availability plan monitored by our directors. So, and it's had results. Yeah, you have to do a lot of stuff sometimes just to get one extra unit. You might have to do 50 or 60 different things just to get one extra unit. You know, so outcomes: slow, steady rise. Step change in May next year is needed. So we go up another 2 EMUs in May. We go up to 33 from our 29 BMUs, so another 4. We've got new actions replacing the closed ones. Long-term stop, those crashes, actually Stadler are quite good at that. They've got a team that flies in and they get fixed in a couple of months, where historically we have to send 170s to Brovies in Scotland. So it's not bad, but don't leave it to your production. Don't let their production team, day-to-day production team manage it. It needs to be somebody independent from that. Investment in facilities, investment in staff will and has delivered dividends. And MTBF, it's not just empty. And this is the gap between the TSA and the MSA. They're all about failures being empty, causing delays. There are other things that go wrong on trains that cause them to be stopped, that stop them from coming out in the day, that need work in the depot. And unless you can reduce those frequencies as well, it won't affect the availability. Targets for availability internally moderated to allow for incidents as well. Performance, yeah, so including reliability. Too many parties with slightly different goals. You know, MTIN versus minutes versus cancellations. You have that in a normal railway. It gets even worse when you've got a new train with different goals. Complex processes for change as well. Focus was initially very technical. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. Root cause is always good. Software, for people going from old trains to new trains, software. It was both root cause of many problems, software problems, but actually it provided a useful tool to mitigate other issues as well in the meantime. So, and Stadler could turn their software around quite quickly. It wasn't months and months and months. So it was a useful mitigation tool, yeah. Establish relationships, where in the factory we've got people in Switzerland, people locally. If you haven't got those personal relationships within the engineers set up, they literally speak another language. And I don't mean Swiss German to English. They are on different pages. And the other thing as well is, if you're not careful, you can get bogged down in too much data. You need to get the information out of it, process it, and get what's useful. So, approach joint performance improvement plan, as you'd expect. Initially they were weekly, they're now every other week. Separate a little bit about performance and technical. What I mean about that is the technical's the root cause, engineering why it goes wrong. The performance is how do we manage it? How do we keep the delay down? How do we make sure that when it does happen, it's not, you know, newspaper headlines because passengers have got stuck for 3 hours in the train and actually you've been able to reset and go. We use both the DOTE, which is quite commonly used, defective on-train equipment, and we've been refining that. That's a dynamic document. It's not just a document that gets delivered and it's there. It's dynamic. You need to keep reviewing it. And we have something that we use called a decision support tool for the phone a friend. And again, that knowledge base has been built up as the trains come in, and we have processes that every incident we have, there are people looking at that incident and going, how can we have handled it differently? What do we need to tell the drivers? What do control need to do differently? Is there a little mod we could do on the train that would halve the time of recovering that train? You know, so root cause and mitigation. I've mentioned already, review of LD structure and contract, including bonus as well as penalties. So look for both ways round. And also, we did it in stage payments. The original contract had, you know, by this date you'll reach 30,000 or you won't get your retention back in the MSA. And we thought, well, that's one big chunk just right at the end. That doesn't help very much. So what we did was says, well, all right, we'll give you some of it back if you hit this much in this time scale, and some of it by this much in this time scale. And we profiled that with the support of the owner. And I've mentioned it before, clear processes for ECR. So outcomes. So in terms of incidents, probably the black line's the most, the MAA. Almost every single month, the incidents on average has come down. Minutes are coming down, cancellations are coming down. I haven't included emptying targets because I'm trying to avoid emptying a little bit. Yeah, the train's going in the right direction. We now get days where we don't have incidents, which is where we were with the old fleet. The BMU fleet is without a shadow of a doubt more reliable than our old DMU fleet. You'd hope it would be, but it is. It's there, probably getting on for twice as reliable. And even this last month, our intercities are sort of getting up to about the 50,000 emptying, which is where we want them to be, where we want to be contractually. So we're now getting into the right place. So summary, and given I've got about 3 minutes left, rollout of new trains dependent on the non-technical issue as well as the technical. This is very much think about the people piece and how you're managing stuff. Early decisions and plans have a big impact on delivery, not just for fleet. So making sure you get those early decisions from your bid right. Need to ensure decision making is robust and efficient with cross-business buy-in on a stopwatch and not a calendar. If somebody says we'll take it to the next 4 weekly directors meeting, do you need to be saying no? If that's how high in the business has got to go for a decision, they need to be deciding this week, not in 2 weeks' time or whenever. Plans will change, so contingency is needed. Keep thinking contingency. And then the final, I think, message, which I mentioned before in summary, is avoid false economy. Watch out for people that are trying to save a penny and actually are gonna trip you up. So, okay, thank you very much. Time for any questions.
Thanks, Steve. That was fantastic. Yeah. So, has anyone got any questions from the room? Yes, we've got some hands up already.
Can you go through editing just quickly?
Terribly sorry. It's miles between technical incidents. Yeah. So on the railway, every time a train is delayed, on the mainline rail, the threshold is 3 minutes. Yeah. And then there's a process that says, right, okay, it's a technical incident, it's been caused by the train in some way, shape, or form, and then effectively it's the average distance of train travels between failing. Yeah. So that's most railways use a similar measure, but it doesn't necessarily measure the impact on the customer, because one incident could be a small delay just to that train, or one incident could be a big delay that causes, I don't know, 10, 15 trains to be delayed while you move it out of the way. Yeah. So I think you also had your head up to start with.
Thank you. I mean, you cleared 50,000 empty on a relatively fleet, pretty good going, so you must be quite pleased with that.
It's not MIA. I'll probably exaggerate. It's one period, but we're heading in the right way. Yeah.
So, but in the project as a whole, there's obviously a lot of challenges, and I suspect, my experience probably a big one, Marine, there's similar challenges in all these new trains projects. You seem to go over them again and again in this industry. What's the way out of that? How do we, for people who are going to
keep coming to presentations at the IMechE, yeah, because I've been to them in the past, and there were things that people have said to me in various presentations I've been in the past that I've taken on board with this project, as well as obviously taking experiences in other things I've done. And it is about that knowledge sharing. It is about that knowledge sharing. At the moment, we are an industry of, I don't know, 26 different clocks. I've lost track now. Is it 22, 26? That's changed. Plus, we've got other operators like London Underground. We've got people in Northern Ireland that are joining us as well. And it's how we share that information to grow. RDG, Rail Delivery Group, have produced things like almost standard specs for new trains, where, you know, as we specify this train and we go, we didn't get that quite right. We really should have written the specification this way and written it that way so it's less interpreted and so on. We've fed back into those RDG's technical specs. If I go back 10, 15 years ago, a lot of those almost templated train technical specifications didn't exist. That's really useful for the industry to be able to develop from a solid base of, you know, it's not dictating, it's not saying thou shalt, because otherwise every train's the same. I was with Nexus today, who come down from Newcastle. I said, I've got this presentation prepared for you about train introduction. I didn't tell them I was presenting tonight. But I was with Nexus today, and they were saying exactly the same kind of thing. How is it that a lot of this stuff is learned? Well, one of the reasons is they came to see us today. Transport for Wales came to see us probably about just under a year ago to benchmark how we were getting on and what the key issues were. We need to do that, and we mustn't forget that. We just need to keep doing that on a regular basis. So, in my view, I think the other thing actually. So you asked quite a wide question there. Well, the other question is a bit about how we buy trains. So having worked with Stadler, I had a bit of insight about how trains are sold elsewhere in Europe. And the one thing that's really, really unique for us, probably the Germans are the closest, but not quite, is we specify the shortest timescales with the highest standards. You're on a really safe railway, very high, very demanding, and we put the biggest liquidated damages associated against it. And that starts driving behaviour. It really does start driving behaviour because you're doing that in that way. And then when you think about it, our franchise model does that, because when you're bidding for a 7-year franchise, you can't afford to go, well, we're going to buy it in 4 years, a bit like the Germans do, and just make sure we get it absolutely right. You can't afford to do that, because by the time you've then finished introducing your fleet, you've got nothing to left pay back and offer to the Department of Transport. So if there's a bit of it that comes back to the structure and model about how we buy trains, I'm not going to say it's what we do is wrong, but actually we also need to look at that model and ask ourselves the question, is that the right model? Because we work the same way with a different. I was involved in buying 379s as well. I was on the other side of the fence with 95 tube stock a lot longer ago. And you're right, it's not just a manufacturer thing. They all have the similar issues. It all very, very similar challenges. So I think there's a little bit about how we structure ourselves about going buying trains in the UK as well, that drive certain behaviours and drive certain challenges. So I think we were 3 months late with our first train, which I felt for a new train in the UK from a manufacturer that hasn't produced one before was pretty good going. But if I look back and go, you know, that was I'm not going to say scary stuff, it's the wrong phrase because I don't want to get safety in it, but it was, as I said there, calendar, stopwatch, that was the difference. Everything was 24/7 for a long while. You know, it was just, it was a lot of resource, very, very intense. And that became very separate to the day-to-day business, and then we had to bring it back as per my slide. So I don't know if that helps. So, chap in the green top.
Yeah, So you mentioned a lot about the 12 car trains and said like never buy them. Got here.
I didn't say never buy those particular 12 cars. That might upset Stadler. Don't buy them in a fixed formation.
Whatever. GTR actually also have trains that are 12 cars in fixed formations. Yeah. And they were introduced much like a few years earlier than the Stadlers.
Yeah.
Did you feel like there were lessons that you could have applied when pairing these Stadlers into services?
So from GTR?
Like from how GTR maintained their 12 car trains.
I think you could be right. I mean, we did speak to GTR in terms of how they gone about what they'd done. They had some quite significant investment, but what we also found was that they had some of the similar challenges. And I think you'll probably find, certainly if you speak to the people at GTR that were there, Jerry and people that were at GTR at the time, they would probably say a similar message about they wish they could have split the trains in half because it would have made their life simpler. So I think, you know, part of our conversation with them was, along the same lines really. But by that point, the die was cast because, as you said, they were introduced shortly before ours. So if there wasn't that opportunity for the lessons to be learned in the procurement spec. Hello.
So I know you said you bought them as fixed 12 car trains. Is that because you always run them as 12 car trains, or would there be opportunities for you to run them as a 6 car train?
So we always run them as 12 car. And I think my point is probably more a maintenance point than it is a customer point. I fully understand why the customer wants a train you can walk all the way through without 2 cabs in the middle. Yeah, and I was probably biased because, as I said before, I worked for London Underground, and I saw a very successful train that was able to be split in the middle, making maintenance a lot easier. Because you could mix and match different hearts, but even more basically than that, you can fit them in a shed somewhere that you can't fit a bigger train in. And when I've applied that to Crown Point, there are sheds I can fit a 6 car in, I can't fit a 12 car in, which then limits where I can do the maintenance. It limits that flexibility and how you do it. We had to, the original plan was to have a 12 car lifting road. I think Eurostar had one once, I don't think they've got it anymore. A 12 car lifting road, because that's what was meant to be delivered. We've now got a bogie drop, because actually the concept of having one spotter per vehicle and everything to lift a 12 car and having more people than they actually employ on a shift out there to lift a 12 car was just impractical, just wasn't there. So so we've ended up putting in the bogie drop, and funnily enough, GTR putting a bogie drop in at Hornsey, which is why I can't turn my wheels anymore. They've gone, oh dear, we need a bogie drop. So I think that's one of the reasons I'm confident you probably, I don't know if there is anybody from GTR in the room or online, but you probably get a similar answer that if it's not that you want necessarily to have the cabs in the middle, but you want to be able to split them, put a shunt control panel in, put something in where you can safely move them and split them. And you know, the really hard bit for me in buying the trains was later on, when it was too late and they were being manufactured over a beer with their project manager. He said the worst thing to me he could possibly say. He said, funnily enough, Steve, if you'd written that in the spec when we're bidding, probably wouldn't have cost you anymore. Because that sort of stuff's lost in the detail of the bid of a new train. And I was just sitting there. Yeah, but anyway, next question. Hello.
Why are they so narrow-bodied?
Why are they so narrow-bodied? They're not. They're as wide as a 20-metre vehicle can be. And that is, if you go and find the gauge, the Network Rail standard gauge, that is the shape of the flirt. And literally, Stadler took the shape of the gauge, didn't put straight sides down. So you might have regretted a bit later with DOO and angles looking down the side of the train. But that shape is the, I think it's the WB64 gauge. And then you do your normal calculations about what's your tightest curve you've got to go around, and therefore what shape it is. There is a little bit that's lost compared to some trains because actually the body was quite thick. But I'm only talking about that kind of thickness because of the method they use for body construction. So it's quite a solid body side. So, but yeah. And the other reason is they're very thin at the bottom. They're a low floor train. So to meet that WB64 gauge, you've got to follow the gauge. Most trains stop at the high floor level. These keep coming in. And that means that we have, issues about foot space, where you've got the heaters down at that low level and you've got the heaters coming in. because the curve of the bottom comes in there. But that's about having a low floor train that's got to meet the network rail gauging standard. And when you get down into that area, you've got to come in further. So yeah, that's why they come out so much, to try and give as much space as possible. And the other thing they've done in the design as well to give space to it, I don't know, how many people in the room's been on one, just out of interest? That's quite a good number, that's not bad. I should say how many people are online, but I won't see your hands, sorry. But those that have been on them, one of the things they've also done is they've switched the traditional seating arrangement around. So normally the seating arrangement is that you end up with a sort of centre runner that hangs down in most trains, a bit like the Mark 3s, and then the sides are higher. They've turned it the other way around. So all the cable runs are actually running along the side, which gives them easier access if you ever want to do mods. But it also means that the actual centre is very, very close. So there's with a low floor train, there's a really good spacious feeling of height as you're walking down the middle of the trains compared to most trains. So that might make them feel a little bit narrower because they've got that extra height. So it's a feeling kind of guess, really. So any other questions? Oh,
you mentioned about not using existing depots. For example, if LU is procuring a new fleet of trains and then they want to maintain it in the same depot, is it more efficient to use the same depot and the same machinery? And
so for the maintenance, yes. So I'll clarify that. Once you're finished using the maintenance that you've got, I haven't got a problem with that. During the introduction, if you can identify somewhere else, and I'm going to joke, Highgate. Take one road out of Highgate, put a big tent across several roads, yeah, stick some platforms in, you're going to spend, I don't know, £1 million setting it up and have that as your commissioning site and separate. Yeah, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of staging space, but you're going to have a separate site which has got enough facilities to do your commissioning, get the trains ready, get them into service, and mean that Golders Green and Morden isn't overburdened. Now, if you've got lots of depot facilities and you're running a railway and you're fortunate enough that you've got spare roads, and actually we weren't too tight when we were on the Northern Line because Morden was pretty generous, Golders wasn't bad, then it's perhaps not so much of an issue. But if you were like we are, where you've got very, very few roads, and you know there's just going to be a direct, you know, we had 2 roads you could put 12 car on, yeah, for maintenance of the Mark 3s. And then we were bringing 12 cars in to be commissioned. We literally moved our maintenance of our Mark 3s to Bounds Green Depot. And we ended up with a contract that we were moving trains across to Bounds Green to do their maintenance over there, to create space at Crown Point for them to be able to actually commission the trains and have them in a shed. So yeah, I suppose that was another way we gave the maintenance work of the old trains somewhere else. And every 3 days we will be moving Mark 3 sets round to Bounds Green Depot across the Northumberland line in order to get their core basic exams. Yeah, Fleet was cycling through Bounds Green. Really, really good job. Hardly had any issues with trains not in service, so they did really, really well. But it's that what I'm trying to emphasise is that conflict if you use your maintenance depot, particularly if you're already tight for facilities in your maintenance depot. So, right.
So what were the most unreliable parts of the train that you had to deal with?
Different stages, really. We've still got issues with compressors.
Doors and software and
yeah, software. So a lot of things come back to software, and software from different suppliers. So petards, don't know what version of software we're on now. Loads and loads of versions of software to get their kit right. I mean, if you spoke to our drivers, they'd go yellow doors. Common phrase always coming out on the page are yellow doors. It was basically when one of the modules on the train dropped offline, wasn't communicating it, and warned the driver it doesn't know what state of the doors are in. So yellow doors was probably one of the most prolific for a long time, which was a software fix, funnily enough.
But that was a monitoring system, not the actual door. The door was closed.
It was the network, and it was actually to do with network switches, and it was to do with the fact that petards were piggybacking on an annex network, yeah, and therefore petards were unfamiliar. Their software didn't normally run on the switches that it was running on this train. And there were at very low levels in code clashes, and it was back to the manufacturer of the switch, which is, you know, what percentage of their supply in the world is trains, very small, to actually identify the bugs in their code in order to get new versions of switch software in order to resolve those kind of issues. And that's probably why it hung around for one of the longest, was the fact that actually we weren't just trying to get petards or a railway supplier to do their software, we were trying to get the manufacturer of the switch. which is a, albeit industrial switch, but a switch to actually alter some of their code. In terms of physical kit, silly stuff still. Every new train is silly stuff. Cab door locks. Cab doors coming apart and door bolts coming off it and that sort of stuff. Initially it's like, oh, run around, talk them all up properly. Oh, it's still happening, there's something more to it. So there's still what I'll call that kind of stuff. There was a lot of stuff that we had that's related to perhaps UK-isms as well, where the way they integrated some of the AWS, TPWS wasn't quite right. I mean, it worked as a system, it did what it should do. From a safety perspective, it passed all the tests. Under certain circumstances, its reporting was incorrect. So it was telling the driver it had problems when it didn't have problems. And again, that was Stadler's interpretation of that. What other systems? Doorsteps. Yeah, the doorstep one was quite interesting because having seen a few people, Ian Walmsley and Steve Rees around the depot to write an article on modern railways, and then personally asked me, has anyone had any trouble with steps? I went, none at all. Funnily enough, 2 weeks later, we started having problems with steps, but we only have problems with steps at Manningtree and Tottenham Hale. And of course, we're scratching our heads because the trains are in traffic. Why all of a sudden now is there a problem with steps getting stuck out at these locations? It's simple. Passengers come back after COVID. And when we were running trains in COVID on a 12-car train, they only used really one door, the one that happened to be nearest the station door exit that they come in and out. That one at the end of Manningtree platform, nobody ever used. So, and on top of that, the number of people getting on the train never changed the height of the train. And we just had one of these circumstances where the step was just the right height to go over the platform. The platform was just far enough away from the ultrasonic sensor. And then if you put enough people on it, the rubber bit of the step just caught as it came back. Didn't do it every time, only happened every now and then. And exactly the same at Tottenham Hale. They ran fine for a year and a bit before people started getting back on the train, and then, we got problems. And we've had several things like that that have ended up with our door sensitive edges. We've got a problem with corrosion inside of the door sensitive edge because the water runs down the sensitive edge, as a channel. There's a drain channel down the middle for any water that collects on the top of the doors. And you'd sit there and think, okay, that's fine. But the manufacturing process where they join 2 parts of the rubber, they thin the rubber, so in certain areas it would break, and therefore the water will get in. But you only get water on the door if the door's open, because it's actually the top that gets wet when it rains, not anywhere else. So if the door is closed, it doesn't happen. If it's not open for very long, you don't get enough water really. So it's only open if the door's open for long enough and that particular sensitive edge is broken. And of course, we've just started seeing these and they're starting accelerating. And again, the question is why? It's back to passengers being on the train. And more than that, one of the little nice little accessibility features Stadler have is on the C car, as we call it, which is the PRM toilet and the PRM wheelchair area. There's an extra button. What that button does is it doesn't auto close the doors after 10 seconds. It leaves it open to make sure. Also tends to be used by our catering staff when they put the trolleys on and off because it's near the bistro. And of course, we were wondering why the sensitive edges were failing on C cars before every other. Why is it always a C car? We're going to realise as it started raining, as people have got back on, they're getting used more and more often. They're the ones that stay open for longer every single time because they're the ones that are programmed to do that. They're not there for 10 seconds now. They're there for the whole duration. So yeah, it's what I call the normal kind of stuff you find out, the normal onions that you have to peel back the layers on until you get to the core and nub of the problem. And some of them you take 2 or 3 times, and sometimes you're lucky and do it the first time. So
it reminds me of when we introduced the 95s on the Northern Line. They're really good reliability running, and as soon as we put passengers on loads of different toilets,
absolutely,
it's always the same.
Absolutely, yeah. Hello.
I was to report that you're changing the Deutsch diesel engine. Is that correct?
Not to a different type of engine, as in Cummins or anything else. We are going to be taking them all out to do a modification to the pistons. So at the moment, the bi-modes, then I've mentioned earlier on the difference between MTBF and MTIN. So diesel engine still does affect the MTIN, but not massively because they're doing quite well compared to old trains. Boy, what it does is put a workload on that depot. Changing engines out. So we've now got to the point where we're going, we're going to run a mod program where we're going to take every engine raft out that's got both a 1.5 ton alternator and an engine on. We're then going to swap the engine. I say we. Good, we, us and Stadler. and probably using Clacton Depot as well. So it's a few more rumours, not quite there yet, but use of Clacton for a while will be is being considered. But yeah, that's absolutely correct. There's a problem with the pistons, and there's a mod program that will be changing out every single engine, all 128. Any further? Oh, another one back there.
So theoretical question, with a double decker to solve the problems.
Would double-decker trains solve the problems? What problem were you wanting to solve? Capacity. So I travelled on the double-deckers a lot when I was going to and from Switzerland, funny enough, because I've been given the job of buying trains from Switzerland and then saying to everybody, by the way, I'm scared of flying. So I spent my first few months going out there by train and experienced a lot of Europe's trains, which was also quite useful, until I overcame my fear of flying because there just wasn't time to do it. But the double-deckers, yeah, but to put a double-decker train in, you've got some massive infrastructure problems, haven't you? You know, and funny enough, the other question then comes back with a double-decker is you'll increase the capacity, but you've got to go back to dwell time. So it may not be suitable in all locations and all routes, because actually the time, if you get too many people in the one, you're going to end up introducing a dwell time issue. Now, to be fair, we didn't get what we thought we might get with the single door, but I think with double deckers, you've got a bit more than just one step to go up and down inside the train. We've got multiple steps to go up and down inside the train. So they may be suitable in certain locations, but it's got to be a location that's less metro, which of course, ironically, is why you want more people in a train. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think double deckers are necessarily the answer for everything. I've seen in Europe they are the answer for certain types of railway, and I'd never write it off. But the biggest barrier to that is infrastructure. You know, height of overhead wires, height of the bridges, even more so in certain locations. So there's if you want to do something like that, it might be new railway time that you do something like that. That would be if you built a new railway, rather than necessarily trying to upgrade an existing one, I would imagine.
We've got any questions online?
Yeah, sorry.
Hands, or raise your hand or unmute your mic if you've got a question on.
Unmute your mic and shout as loud as you can.
Well, we'll take silence as no questions.
Okay.
Can't see any in the chat either. So, Steve, thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation. You've certainly given us a lot to think about, and it's great for you to come along and share all your lessons learned that you have from delivering these trains into service. So really well done on doing a great job in getting these in service, and also for coming here and presenting to us. I'm sure on behalf of everyone, I'd like to say thank you very much. And if we could all show appreciation in the usual way. This leaves me just to close proceedings for this evening. Just a quick couple of notices, which are that our next event is on the 17th of November. We will be here, but our presenter will be online, so that will be a new experience. That will be on Resignaling London Underground on the 17th of November. So please go on the website to register for that if you're interested in finding out how they've done that. And of course, every year we have the Future of Rail Young Members Presentation Competition. We'll shortly be opening for entry, so any young members interested in presenting some of their excellent work and winning a cash prize, please put in your abstracts for a chance to be involved in that. Thank you very much all for coming. Thank you very much for coming online. Yeah, I hope to see you at the next event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So many things that I recognise.
I know.